Hi, I'm Crystal. Welcome to TAPtv. This year, Trade a Plane celebrates its 75th birthday. On this episode, we look back at the remarkable history of TAP Publishing Company. So sit back and enjoy this very special episode of TAPtv. In 1922, a young man named Cosby Harrison eagerly anticipated his first ride in a flying machine. He reluctantly handed over his hard-earned $5 and climbed inside a barnstormer Curtiss Jenny. When he stepped out after the ride, he knew that a lifelong passion for aviation had been created. Cosby returned to his hometown of Crossville, a tiny hamlet of 1,100 nestled in the rolling hills of East Tennessee. He became manager of the local theater, the Mecca, and introduced talking movies to the area in 1930. He also managed an auto dealership and operated a garage facility. Although his business pursuits kept him very busy, Cosby never lost his love of aviation. In 1929, he began building a homemade glider from a kit that he had ordered from a magazine.
I read where a company had a biplane glider kit for sale. $35 for a glider you could build yourself. And that was just about all the money I could scrape up, so I ordered it. The price sounded so good, but come to find out, there was a catch to it, and I ended up buying $100 worth of other stuff. Kept the living room cluttered up all winter working on that glider.
Cosby completed his glider, but soon had greater ambitions. He saw an ad in a magazine advertising new Swallow airplanes. He could get last year's model for $995. He borrowed money from the local bank and was soon on the bus to Wichita in October of 1930.
That airplane salesman must have smiled when he saw me coming. One ride in that Swallow and I was writing a check.
Having no previous instruction, Cosby hired a local Wichita pilot to fly he and his new airplane back to Crossville and teach him how to fly it. After a harrowing trip, Cosby and his pilot finally arrived. Flying in Tennessee mountains with an underpowered OX-5 had spooked the Flatlander pilot, and he refused to give instruction in this unforgiving, mountainous, heavily forested environment. Cosby sent the pilot back to Kansas and began taking instruction in nearby Knoxville. Soon he could fly himself anytime he wanted. In the fall of 1931, Cosby slightly damaged the Swallow in a landing accident. He flew the injured bird to Knoxville for repair and storage for the winter. That year, the Great Depression had tightened up even more, and Cosby decided that he would sell his beloved Swallow. On March 26, 1932, Cosby and friend Wilkes Myers hitchhiked to Knoxville to retrieve the airplane. After taking off and flying for an hour, Cosby and Wilkes began to encounter scattered storms and low ceilings. Cosby decided to turn east toward the town of Harriman.
I flew up a hollow with hills on each side, and I thought, oh, what if this plays out? Because I was flying as high as I could get, my absolute ceiling. Sure enough, I saw I was boxed in, but it just so happened the wind going up the hollow lifted us just barely over the top. I thought I could feel the plane brushing the tops of the trees.
Cosby and Wilkes were in a serious predicament. They were rapidly running out of ceiling with nowhere to land.
I came up around to Harriman, but I still couldn't locate the landing field. And then I thought I could land in an open place there by the railroad bridge, but after I brought the plane down, I saw the ground was so rough it would tear up my plane. Now I was over the river and the railroad bridge was dead ahead, but I was down below it and just couldn't make it over. I pulled the nose up and banked sharply to the left, and one of the wheels almost touched the telegraph wire that ran along one side of the bridge. The plane was just at a stall, but I immediately nosed it back down in order to get the flying speed, and I almost went in the river. I flew just over the water to a field I thought I could land in, and I did land, but I bounced 200 or 300 feet, came down on the nose, and flipped over.
Cosby and Wilkes scattered quickly out of the wreckage, worried that a fire could break out at any moment.
Wilkes looked back and said, "Cosby, we've torn it all to hell." I told him to hell with the plane as long as we get out alive. But I knew there's no way I could afford to buy another. And we talked down toward the river, and I said, Wilkes, there has to be some way to make money out of flying.
Cosby had the smashed Swallow taken apart and transported back to Crossville. He sold the wreckage a few years later. The Swallow had only flown 80 hours in its short life. Although Cosby no longer had an airplane, he was still passionate about aviation, and he surrounded himself with like-minded aviation enthusiasts. Soon Cosby found himself to be part of a loose network of aviators. He had learned long ago that this type of networking was crucial when trying to find parts to repair his Swallow. One day in July 1937, Cosby met with Fred Robison, a gentleman who recently had lost a piston while in flight from his home-built airplane. Fred asked Cosby if he knew where he could find another one. Cosby said that he didn't, but somewhere, someone had one, if he could just find a way to contact them. Cosby walked back to his car and returned with a writing tablet. He wrote down Fred's request, along with parts requests from other aviators who had walked up and joined the conversation. Cosby announced that he would be visiting several local airports, taking similar orders from people who had something to buy or sell. He asked for postage money so that he could mail his compilation to everyone who had requested it. A week later, Cosby mailed his compilation consisting of 7 want ads to this group. 2 weeks later, he mailed another containing 18 ads. Cosby knew that he couldn't keep handwriting his trading notes, but the concept led to an even greater idea. Cosby borrowed $1,000 from a local doctor. He contacted the U.S. Department of Commerce, who, for $25, provided him with a list of all registered pilots and aircraft owners. He then contacted the Coleman Printing Company in Knoxville and asked them to print up 500 letters announcing the launch of a new service and to solicit ads. He mailed these letters to every pilot with more than 200 hours and eagerly waited for a reaction. He soon received 2 ads, a check for $3.40 and a dollar bill. Cosby was elated.
I kissed that dollar bill and told anyone that would listen, this country boy is getting money in the mail.
Cosby compiled his ads and took them to Coleman Printing, who printed up 9,000 copies on pink, green, blue, orange, and yellow paper. He hired high school students to address them by hand, and his wife and daughters folded them at the kitchen table. On October 5, 1937, the first issue of Trade-a-Plane Service was triumphantly mailed. Cosby published 3 issues in October of 1937. Using each issue to solicit ads for the next, by the middle of November, Cosby had only 8 ads for the next issue. He wanted to quit, but encouraged on by his wife Margaret, he persevered, and on closing day, several dozen ads arrived in the mail. In November, Cosby published 2 issues, with every ad placed running in both issues. Trade-a-Plane would be published twice per month until 1943. Money was extremely tight in the early days. The first few issues were printed by Coleman in Knoxville at a cost of $40 per issue, and Cosby needed desperately to reduce his printing costs. He purchased a used manual press for $400 and began laboriously printing issues in-house. By February of 1938, Cosby began to doubt the viability of his new business. In issue number 10, he appealed to readers for feedback.
If you have spent money with us for advertising, would you be so kind as to send in a few words telling of your results? So far, we have lost money on each issue published, and if our service is no good, we want to quit. On the contrary, if it is good, we want to continue. The writer is a gambler, having owned and operated at one time one of those OX5 jobs, so roll those dice and send those letters. Yours very truly, Cosby Harrison.
Unfortunately, no feedback was received save a single encouraging card, prompting Cosby to write in issue number 11.
As to the letters I asked for in the last issue, I did not receive any. One fella wrote a card of compliments but asked that it not be published.
Cosby once again repeated the call for feedback, and this time many were received, including one from a slightly miffed fan.
The fellow who wrote the card happened to be a girl. You may publish same if you really desire.
A slightly embarrassed and perhaps flirtatious Cosby responded in the same issue.
Ms. King, now that you have turned out to be a girl, I appreciate your compliments more than ever. But the sad part is that I destroyed the card one day too soon. I guess you'd better write another.
Even with much encouraging feedback, Cosby was deeply in debt and had exhausted all available credit. By issue number 13, the paper was down and the future looked bleak. Cosby decided that he would leave the fate of the business to this critical issue. If it made money, he would continue, but if it lost money, he would quit. Making the final post office run for the issue, Cosby hastily opened the envelopes in the front seat of his car. Quickly computing the results in his head, Cosby determined that issue number 13 would make a $1.25 profit, a 20% gain in revenue over the previous issue. Trade-a-Plane was here to stay. One day, after working late that night and into the morning, Cosby realized that the small manual press was becoming more and more impractical as circulation grew. Still deeply in debt, Cosby borrowed money from family and friends. He was able to barely scrape up $5,500, which he used to purchase a new Miller Simplex automatic press. Cosby would also go on to hire Trade-a-Plane's first employee, Golda Hall. Golda, an attractive brunette and former beauty pageant winner, performed numerous administrative and production tasks around the office. Growth was strong in the build-up to World War II. 2 months before Pearl Harbor, both sides of the 20 by 25-inch paper were filled with ads. In October, Cosby would proudly mail the 100th issue.
Well, this one-horse outfit is still plugging along. But the way the quarters are rolling in, it looks as if it might be a big outfit someday. And as one fellow wrote, we may really have something here.
As the paper grew in size and circulation, expansion was inevitable. Cosby moved the business out of the garage and into a new building. A linotype machine was acquired for easier and faster typesetting, and George Tatterow was hired to operate it. Although still in debt, Cosby established a long-standing Trade-a-Plane tradition. For Christmas, he gave Golda and George a bonus of $1,000, quite a large amount of money for 1942. The war started taking a toll on advertising, with Trade-a-Plane seeing its first decrease in size in years. All U.S. aircraft manufacturers shifted to military production, eliminating the civilian market for new aircraft. However, there was still a small civilian market for used airplanes, and ads continued to trickle in. In 1943, Cosby began publishing 3 issues per month, a policy that would continue into the next century. 1943 also marked the start of another long-standing tradition, the front page cartoon. Although cartoons had been in the paper sporadically since 1941, they became a permanent fixture starting with the first January 1943 issue. Most of the early cartoons were drawn by Ed Donnelly, a close friend of Cosby's who later would serve the company as a manager. During this time, Cosby also employed various family members to help with the production of the paper, including his daughters Mary Lucille, Jean, and Joanne. The success of Trade-a-Plane was starting to be noticed. Competitors started appearing, but most were short-lived and survived only a few issues. Trade-a-Plane was being read far and wide. It was a struggle, but Trade-a-Plane survived the lean years of World War II. The war ended in 1945, the same year that a young school principal, Roy Stone, was brought on as publisher. Mr. Stone would serve in that capacity for the next 43 years. The post-war period was a time of rapid expansion for Trade-a-Plane, and Cosby began hiring many returning vets to fill positions. Decorated war veteran Ralph Buddy Strawn was brought on board as editor, a position he would hold for 32 years. By 1947, the company had 21 full-time employees and 6 part-timers. In 1948, Cosby moved the company to its current location on 4th Street in Crossville. During the war, the military trained hundreds of thousands of pilots. After the war, many of these returning GIs wanted to continue in aviation. In addition, aircraft manufacturers were once again building civilian aircraft. This combination resulted in a huge post-war boom in general aviation, and Trade-a-Plane was poised to reap the benefits. In 1950, Cosby was involved in a large construction project that ultimately resulted in the need to sell a large amount of heavy construction equipment. Realizing that he had excess publishing resources available, he began a new buy-sell publication, similar to Trade-A-Plane, but geared toward heavy equipment. In 1950, Rock&Dirt was born. On the 27th of June, the first 11 by 18-inch issue of Rock&Dirt was mailed to 20,000 contractors. The future looked bright for both publications, with circulation and ad counts climbing every year. Both papers were folded broadsheets that had grown to several pages. In 1961, the purchase of a new press resulted in a change to current tabloid format. The papers remained unstapled until a McCain bindery was added in 1965. In 1961, Cosby Harrison stepped away from day-to-day operations at Trade-A-Plane, choosing instead to work on his many other projects, including building lakes and a vacation resort. The 60s and 70s were a time of fantastic growth for both publications. Many World War II vets had settled, raised families, and gained enough affluence to afford airplanes. A construction and real estate boom during the same period of time ensured healthy sales for Rock&Dirt as well. The company entered the computer era in 1976 with a CompuGraphic Unisetter replacing the old Linotype typesetter. In 1978, an NCR mainframe system was brought online to handle subscriptions. In 1980, Haztec software running on a DEC PDP-11 replaced the CompuGraphic. The Haztec remained in service until 1991, when it was replaced with the Harris Cache system. By the 1980s, many of the early employees began to retire. Sadly, Cosby Harrison, the company's founder, passed away in 1984. During this time, the Harrison family's third generation began assuming management roles within the company. In 1983, the company expanded by acquiring TradeQuip International from Gulf Publishing Company. TradeQuip was a struggling buy-sell publication that had been serving the oil industry for 5 years. The first issue printed by the company was a meager 12 pages, but it would soon grow much larger. Since 1937, the company had been known simply as Trade-A-Plane. In 1985, recognizing that 3 distinct publications were now being printed, the company officially changed its name to TAP Publishing Company. This name paid homage to the company's Trade-A-Plane heritage, while also recognizing it as an umbrella for a variety of publications. By 1987, the number of employees had grown to over 90. Expansion continued into the 1990s, and a commercial printing division was added in 1990, as well as the introduction of a Spanish version Rock&Dirt in 1992. 1994 saw the introduction of Amateur Radio Trader, a buy-sell publication targeted at the amateur radio community. The rise in popularity of the World Wide Web in the mid-1990s dramatically altered the way time-sensitive information is collected and disseminated. TAP entered the Internet age in 1997 with the deployment of the first website for Rock&Dirt. This event marked the beginning of TAP's electronic publishing era. Soon additional sites would follow for Trade-A-Plane and TradeQuip. In 1997, the company transferred most operations to a modern and spacious new 3-story office building constructed adjacent to the old building. 1998 saw the introduction to TAP's first web-only product, WeatherTap. Introduced at the Oshkosh AirVenture in July, the service brought real-time radar to the Internet for the very first time. It was an immediate hit and many thousands of subscriptions were sold. After the turn of the millennium, TAP continued to innovate and improve. In 2000, film was eliminated from the printing workflow as direct-to-plate technology was implemented. Websites were constantly improved, offering faster listings and allowing users to submit ads online. WeatherTap pioneered content for mobile devices with the release of its PDA feature in 2001. The ATEX advertising and invoicing system replaced the old Harris Cache system in 2002, and an entirely new PC-based business system was written, replacing the older mainframe-based COBOL system. A new press was brought online in 2003, allowing color to be printed on every page. Continuing to keep up with new technology, TAP introduced mobile versions of all publication websites starting in 2008. WeatherTap Zoom, a new smartphone app, was released in 2010 with a Trade-A-Plane app appearing shortly after. In 2008, the TAP product family expanded once again with the introduction of NextTruck. Initially formed as a joint venture with Randall Riley Publishing, NextTruck was acquired entirely in 2011 and converted to web-only publication. 2011 also saw the deployment of a new product. The WeatherTap Travel Weather Kiosk was developed and installed at all interstate rest areas in the state of Tennessee, opening a new market for a new product. The travel weather product was developed into the WeatherTap weather display system, which is currently being sold into a variety of markets. As of 2012, TAP continues to provide information and advertising services in a variety of media using the latest in technology. The TAP family currently includes 4 printed publications, 5 websites, and a commercial printing division. Innovation continues with initiatives for expanding editorial content, exploiting social networking, and improving support for mobile devices and location awareness. Research and development continues on new products, and new markets are continuously being explored and developed. Starting from one man's idea and spanning 75 years, TAP Publishing Company continues its tradition of constant innovation and superior customer service. We hope you enjoyed this episode of TAPtv. Until next time, we wish you blue skies and happy landings.